This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. Dispatches is also supported by the public affairs firm O'Donnell & Associates. For more information, check out o'donnellsolutions.com. And you mentioned the idea of octopi? The plural? Is that right?
I think it's octopuses.
I'm not going to say that on the air.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out. And he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a WCNY podcast about power and politics in New York. And in this episode, we're highlighting lobbying disclosures, and specifically what the public does know and might know in the future about efforts to move, kill, or amend pending legislation in New York, which is the subject of pending legislation in New York. We'll also discuss some of the regulatory hoops that lobbyists have to jump through when they're advocating at the state level already. And to do all that, we're joined in the studio by Doug Clark, co-managing partner and government affairs team leader at Shenker Russo Clark. Welcome back to Dispatches, Doug.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, before we get into the main topic, I want to see how you're feeling about the time left in the session calendar, because the budget is going to be more than a month late, and the best case scenario seems like the legislature spends the next week conferencing big budget issues as they hopefully also take some budget votes, which means the process is going to eat into 3 weeks of the calendar and lose 10 session days that were scheduled for traditional legislative work. So how are you feeling about the potential sprint to the finish?
Well, both good and bad.
Okay.
Good from the sense of for bills that we would like to stop. I mean, this makes that a lot easier. Less time, less things for them to do. But we have a lot of clients that are looking to get legislation done, and this compression makes that very difficult to break through because, every member is going to have their priorities. You got to be on the priority list, and then there's just the fact that there isn't that much time to do everything. I know they've done session years where they basically have done budget and the end of session at the same time, but that's difficult to do. It is incredibly hard on the staff and the members, and it's not a great way to run a railroad.
Well, are you mostly concerned when it comes to big issues about the inability to find time to, say, conference those issues, or are you just worried about the practical challenge of finding floor time for some of these bills that might be subject to debate by the Republicans?
Well, that's a good point that you bring up. I mean, this does, in a way, hand over some authority to the minority parties.
Sure.
It does give them the ability to slow things down. Time is always a weapon that they have in their arsenal. It's one of the only ones that they have.
One that's been neutered to a certain degree, as the speaker pointed out this week when asked about the remaining time on the session calendar. And he said, well, we've limited debate time even more.
Which is true, but if there's just generally less time overall, even those 2 hours or however they've limited debate,
sure,
that still is 2 hours where you're not doing 10, 15, 20 other bills that you could be flying through.
So I imagine, though, you're proactively trying to get things on the radar of central staff, for example. And if you do that, do they have the time of day for you? Or are they basically like, not right now, Doug, there's bigger fish or more immediate fish to fry?
It depends on who you're trying to get a hold of. Obviously, folks dealing with the environmental stuff, they're rather busy.
Some stuff's happening there.
Yeah. But, maybe some of the other stuff, consumer stuff or things like that, maybe they're not quite as busy, so you're able to get a little time there. But it all ultimately comes down to how much time you're going to have on the floor to get the bill through in committee meetings, and those are going to start piling up. And it's going to be a lot of work for the next 5 weeks.
Well, looking at the calendar, I mean, as you say, there are 5 weeks of session scheduled, but I think this next week's going to get eaten up largely by the budget. So When do, say, committees potentially shut down? Is that something that's already on your radar, when they're going to just stop holding the traditional committee schedule?
Oh, sure. I imagine because of, what you're running into is the primary season. Normally, if the budget runs long, they may go a week later, they may go 2 weeks later. They don't have that luxury this year. So, I think I don't think anybody said this publicly, but I think they're going to try to stick to the calendar as much as possible, which means, for the Senate, they close down committees, but you still have the ability to go through rules. The bills get filtered through rules. But in the Assembly, they are more stringent about shutting down most of the committees. You still have codes, ways and means, and rules. But it's really difficult. If you're not in one of those positions, there are things you can do to get your bill going, but it's a big row to hoe.
Are you doing any sort of level setting with clients right now about their expectations? Because on the one hand, if you've got clients who are trying to kill something, I bet you can say, hey, things are really moving in our direction every single day that the budget eats into this. But at the other side of things, you're probably telling people, hey, you might not necessarily get this onto a calendar in both houses this year. I mean, is that a conversation that's already happening?
Oh, of course.
Okay. And how are people handling that news?
It depends on how sophisticated the client they are. We've had some of our clients have been doing this for 35 years, so they get it. Does that change what they want? No. Does it change the fact that they want it now? No. But you do get in there and you say, it's going to be very difficult, but we're going to do all that we can. You want to be careful. On the other side, even though it's easier to kill things, you don't know what things are going to gestate around and what's going to pop. You have to be careful. It could be one of the things that you don't want to have happen. So while, the odds are in your favor, it still could happen. You don't know.
And what about trying to just add things at the last minute to the budget? Is that still an option that you are looking for? This idea that, hey, this isn't closed down. Maybe I can pin one more Christmas ornament to this tree.
That's always a thing that you try to do. And frankly, I think as this stretches out, that's more what you're going to try to do. With larger issues, it'll be more difficult.
Sure.
But smaller things, you can say, hey, can you just put it's not a big deal. Everybody supports it, blah, blah, blah. You take a run at it. I think that once the big issues get decided and things start falling into place, it's going to happen pretty fast. So your chances of success aren't great, but that doesn't mean you don't take a chance.
Well, let's pivot to the main topic right now, and this is a good government bill that's being pushed that would be kind of an expansion on the existing lobbying disclosure requirements that ensure that if someone is interested or doing grassroots or direct or monitoring only of a bill, instead of just having to say that they are registered on that bill, they have to declare whether they're publicly supporting it, whether they're supporting it with proposed amendments, whether they're in opposition or in opposition absent those proposed amendments. On its face, is this something you care about? Is this something you support? Is this something you oppose?
Well, I think, excuse me, I think the issue with this is what it's trying to get at is, and it says this in the sponsors memo, it's trying to rebuild people's faith in the institutions of government. And one of the things that is perceived out there is that there are these conversations that are going on between certain people, and in this case it's lobbyists and members, and we don't know what's being said there. And wouldn't the world be better if everybody knew what was being said in these meetings? So when you take it from the perspective of trying to rebuild trust in institutions, there's nothing wrong with that. We follow the law. If this passes, we'll follow this law. It's when you look at the details and how they do it, it starts to become difficult to follow. By that, I mean, you went through the 4 options that you have. Those are the only 4 options that you have. Right now, the way we operate is whenever we go in on a meeting on a bill, we report that meeting. the law defines lobbying as an attempt to influence. So theoretically, we could go in and have a conversation about a bill and just to informational, find out about the bill. What are you trying to do? What does this mean? How does this work? And that's all it is. You haven't openly said, you should do this. Can you try that? We think this. You're just trying to find out what's going on. So a technical reading of the law would say, I don't have to report that meeting because I was not lobbying in that meeting. We report that meeting because it could be argued that our mere presence as lobbyists, because the commission also takes the position that lobbyists are always lobbyists, you're never not a lobbyist. My mere presence there is an attempt to influence. Me saying that I have an interest in this, even though I don't know what that interest is yet, I am a wave in the ocean, and I am moving this boat ever so slightly.
Sure.
But under the terms of this bill, I would have to say from that meeting one of these four things right away.
And should there be another option then? And if so, what would the option be? Is it information gathering, information sharing? Because if it's that second option, information sharing, I could imagine a world in which that would be something that would blend over to influence.
Right. And I think that's why they only have the four. Because if you have a fifth option that is something that isn't support, oppose, or something else. Like
maybe it was just to hand over a bag of cash.
Well,
JK. William Boylan's not here anymore.
I was thinking Tony Seminario, but okay.
Okay, yeah. Well, so you predate me a little bit.
But if you have this nebulous fifth option, the concern would be that it would be the exception that eats the whole. Everybody would just go to, well, if it's, let's just say it's monitoring. Let's just say it's informational. To be safe, I'm never wrong if I just say I'm monitoring or I'm informational. And that doesn't get at the goal of what the sponsors want, which is to have better insight into people's positions on things.
And to be clear, it's not what that lobbyist's position really is, right? I mean, nobody cares. I mean, I care, Doug, what your positions are.
Well, thank
but
you.
Most people are more interested in the people that are paying you for this. And do you think they would be concerned about having their positions aired out like this? Because I know when I go to report on a bill, the first thing I do, if this bill has existed for more than a few days, is see if anybody is registered to lobby on it. And I can usually make some good inferences about what this position is. But is there a reason why some of these parties might not want to have their positions known or want that ambiguity that they're allowed now?
So I can say, back in the day when I worked inside, were there instances where lobbyists would share their memos with one side and not the other? Yeah, sure. Was that really annoying? Yeah, because it made me look bad as a staffer because I didn't have the information and they didn't have it. But sometimes it's not just the client or the lobbyist that doesn't want the position. And there's the fact that their position may not neatly fit into one of those four categories. So by forcing them into one of those four categories, you're mischaracterizing a more nuanced position.
Sure.
This bill, I tried this line on before I came here, so and it didn't really land. But it's like the Siskel and Ebert of lobbying. Everything isn't thumbs up or thumbs down. There's things in between, and they do recognize that to some degree, but it's not that simple. So, and then there's the idea of how exactly do you report this stuff? And let's take the current debate about what is going on with the CLCPA. So let's say I am an environmental group, and how do I report my position on this? First of all, there's nothing in existence for me to report on, yet you have to report on things that aren't in existence yet, but they are contemplated legislation. So I have to report that I am lobbying on that topic. Do I say that I oppose What am I opposing?
Whatever Marie French would put in her Politico Pro story.
Well, exactly. Or am I supporting the following of the current law? So when you get to the nitty gritty of it, it becomes difficult to characterize somebody's position, not only just in the way that they want it to be characterized, but in a way that's actually correct and useful for people who are looking at it.
Do we allow a narrative to be inserted, or is that not feasible and practical given the extent of bills and opportunities to lobby in New York?
I think that would. I mean, I'm sure you've been to the Lobby Commission colleagues' website. It's not the greatest website in the world.
No.
If you're going to start putting large reams of information on there about how I feel about a particular bill, I don't know that they could practically handle it. But also, I don't think you get at the goal of the bill, which is, kind of a quick and dirty look at where do people stand on things.
Well, can I interest you in the Jim and Barbara Lombardo movie trailer review option, which is, and I could butcher this, so sorry, Dad and Mom, but I believe it's 2 thumbs if they see a trailer. That means they're going to go see it in theaters. 1 thumb means they're going to go wait for it to come to TV. Sideways is, I think, they're on the fence, and then thumbs down is they're not going to see it, period. Is that something we could translate into this?
Or American Bandstand.
Okay.
It's got a great beat, but
I'll do the arm thing, and that, what's it called? That thing you do in the end when they're doing that.
Could you try to concoct something that encompasses all of the various nuances of people's opinions on things? You can try. You're not going to get there. But I want to say that doesn't mean you shouldn't try, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't, pursue legislation that tries to make things better for the public.
What about covering more than just standalone bills, which this bill includes? It talks about appropriation bills. It talks about certain components within bills, and then there's separate bills that deal with lobbying on governmental appointments, like my dear friend Hector LaSalle, whose poster we still have up here.
This doesn't have the appointments in it. That's
right. It's a separate bill. That's a Gianaris McDonald bill that has stalled in the past. I mean, what do you think about that type of specificity that some proposals want to bring to this?
Well, so this does try to bring that specificity to appropriations.
Right.
And there it's even muddier in terms of how do you accurately report this. It's easier for things that are, traditional appropriations, like school aid.
Sure.
You can put that's easily enough. Or, Bundy aid and things like that. Things that are traditional and are in there and are, if there's something that pops up in one of the one House bills, you could point to that. But absent that, a lot of the lobbying that is done for not-for-profits and capital appropriations isn't something that is something you can point to in the first instance or the second instance, or even when the budget's done, because you're still going in and talking to the legislators about maybe pots of money that they have access to, or the governor and pots of money that they have access to. And in this instance, you're not really gaining a whole lot because you already have the public monies requirements that you have to, if you're lobbying for public monies, you have to say that you're lobbying for public money. So that's kind of already baked into what you have to report. Trying to dig further, this starts becoming traps for the unwary or for people who aren't, lawyer lobbyists like myself or have a compliance practice like we do where we can walk you through and do all of these things. If you're just a small not-for-profit trying to get, your swimming pool redone, chances are you're going to mess this up.
And then Dave Grandow to the rescue. One of the things I was struck by about this, though, was it seems like there's not a lot of wiggle room for or need for regulations to implement something like this. It seems like they try to spell out a lot of this in the bill. And do you think the better approach might have been, we want to accomplish X, Y, Z, and we are empowering COLIG to begin the rule and regulation promulgation process so that they can do something like this with the inputs of the Doug Clarks of the world and the people who are experiencing this, as well as the good government groups like Reinvent Albany, so that they can keep pushing for the disclosures they want. I mean, does that type of flexibility make sense in this, or is this an area where you'd rather have everything spelled out in advance in the legislation than who knows what those bureaucrats and Sandy Berland are going to get up to?
Well, I mean, I always like to say a vague disclaimer is nobody's friend.
Okay.
And so to the extent that it can be spelled out from the beginning, that's better. Even if I don't like it, if it's clear, that's better.
And easier to lobby for with amendments, opposed if amendments not adopted.
Well, and even within that, there's different kinds of amendments, right, that you lobby for. One of the couple of the big issues, AI, data protection, things like that. There's these very big bills that touch on all kinds of industries and everything. And within those bills, they may be appropriate for some industries. They may not be appropriate for others. If I go in and I say, I'd like an amendment, can you just take us out of it? Do I support that with an amendment? Well, sort of, but
ultimately you would oppose it if that amendment is not adopted.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty clear. Like we had the cookware industry on the show recently, and they don't like this bill dealing with getting PFAS out of various things made and sold in New York, including Teflon in cookware. And I imagine it'd be pretty simple for them to say, yep, we oppose this if you don't carve us out of it. And that's option D. I mean, that seems pretty self-explanatory.
But if you're looking for more clarity for the public, I think there's a difference between I oppose AI bills and I oppose it only because it doesn't fit for me. And what you also have to look at is how is this going to be used? If you are, say, an unpopular industry, let's pick somebody who's not my client.
Octopus farming.
It's funny you say that. So you're opposed to the octopus farming bill. Now you've put a target on yourself for people to go to your octopus farm.
Which don't exist yet.
Don't tell my little stuffed octopus that sits on my couch in my office.
That was an octopus that was grown in the wild.
Sown in the wild? I don't
Yeah.
know. But, you could be exposing people to more public scrutiny than perhaps they signed up for.
Sure. So this isn't the only change to the world of lobbying that's floating around Albany. Actually, in the budget, there was some language that the governor was pushing, charging fees for ethics, lobbying, training, non-compliance, and increasing lobbying registration fees. I mean, ultimately, we're talking about raising millions of dollars, but as individual lobbyists, I wonder if that's even something that you guys blink an eye at, unless it causes a lot of additional paperwork. I can't imagine the charge is that much of a problem.
I mean, it depends on how much you increase the charge
Sure.
by.
Generally hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, is that something that will bake into how we, a cost of doing business?
Sure.
Yeah. Additional training and things like that. That's fine. I teach a course on lobbying, so it's not.
Where do you teach a course?
Albany Law.
Really?
Yeah.
So I should have introduced you as Professor Doug Clark?
You could have done that, yes.
Wow. I feel like I thought I was getting a bit of an education, and now I know why. Now I know why. Well, is there anything else then that lobbyists would like to see maybe changed or tweaked? Or I guess, what are some changes they're supportive of, amendments they're supportive of, things they're opposed to, things that they're opposed to? I don't know, if amendments aren't done, I'm trying to apply it. In terms of the regulations that you guys deal with already?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask.
Professor Doug Clark.
I think one of the things that all lobbyists...
Adjunct professor.
Yes, adjunct. Online, if we really want to be specific.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think that all lobbyists could agree on. I think it is, trying to make sure that everybody who is in fact lobbying is registering properly and following the rules. There's myriad of consultants out there who have arguments that they're not lobbying, but, if you put their activities next to mine, it'd be hard to distinguish for the average person to know the difference between the two.
Is there an organization or entity that you have in mind specifically? Or type that you want to sort of describe and let people just close their eyes and imagine?
I think anybody who comes to you and says, well, I'm just a consultant, I'm not a lobbyist, I think that should be a red flag that they are trying to creatively get around. Now, there is ways you can do that, but I think these waters are getting very muddy. And part of this is just, changes in technology and the way you can get information out to people. Can do all of these with Twitter. I refuse to call it X.
Yeah, this is a Twitter household still.
My YouTube algorithm apparently pulls up every ad on auto insurance. And now apparently groceries that exist.
Yes, I got a groceries ad. I only was able to remember one of the bill numbers, and it was the Kavanaugh-Kellis bill about food chemical safety. I wasn't fast enough on the other two bills to remember them.
So what I always like to point out, though, is that all of these things, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, right to petition government, they're all in the same constitutional amendment. Yet we treat them very differently when it comes to regulation and putting fences around them.
Well, we're putting value judgments on different things.
The founders didn't. They put them all in one sentence.
Well, they were complicated guys.
Fair enough.
They didn't want anything scrutinized too deeply and for too long. Before I let you go, though, when are all of the lobbyists going to unite on the one issue that I know they all care about or would care about if given the chance? And do you know what this is?
I'm curious to see where you're going.
This is IDs so they can get into the building without having to go through security. Is there any way in which you think state lawmakers could go for that? Is there some way, kind of like TSA pre-check or something that they could bill this as a revenue raiser or a security thing and not ultimately face backlash for helping lobbyists get into the building?
Well, you'd have some say in whether there'd be backlash on that or not.
I think it's reasonable.
The media.
I think the people who are here pretty regularly, if they want to pay for that privilege, they go through some sort of screening. I personally have no problem with it. Whether lawmakers are going to stick their neck out there for that, for the future New York Post or Daily News cover story, I don't know.
I think I think the only way you get that is a decent fee. Mm-hmm. But secondly, some states have the scarlet letter where you have to wear something.
What? Is that real?
Yeah. Some states have that. So I don't know if we got to put on a safety
L for lobbyists
vest or something.
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd ever get it just straight.
Wayne
up.
Lair would look good in that still.
Still wouldn't wear a tie though. Although I'm not wearing a tie today, so
it's not a session day.
I can't really make fun of him for that. But
interesting that other states do that. But I mean, is that something you care about? Are there ever Tuesdays when you're like, Jesus, I wish there was another way to get in the building, and I would pay $200
when you
for that.
see 25 buses lined up outside and you only left 15 minutes to get in the building?
Sure.
Yeah, you go and I wish I would pay anything for a card right now.
But how much would you actually pay for a card on a 2-year basis? And lawmakers listen to this.
I'm not sure how. I mean, could it be more than the fee for registering as a lobbyist?
I pay $75 to register my car, I think, every 2 years, right? Is that what the fee is?
I'm assuming they'd want to go
higher than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could probably get. Well, let's see. It's what, $300 or $350 every 2 years for an attorney.
I'll take your word for it.
You could. I don't think that would make anybody blink.
Sure. And do you have a preferred capital entrance on session days? Are you like Washington? That's my go-to jam. Nobody's ever there, or do you say ride or die on the LOB entrance underground?
Well, generally, I'm a State Street entrance. Used to do Washington, but now it's just easier for me to walk up to State Street. Try to avoid going underneath in the LOB because that can get backed up really fast.
Yep.
And also, when you come around the corner, you can see if it's backed up and, alter your entryway. So,
Nice.
Before you get there.
Well, we've been speaking with Professor Doug Clark. He's also the co-managing partner and government affairs team leader at Shenker Russo and Clark. Doug, thank you so much for making the time, and I look forward to the development of a new feature on Google Maps where you advise people on which entrance at the Capitol to use.
Well, thank you very much, and I think I'll charge a few $100s for that service.